Hey everyone, Jack Toma back here again with my boy Deandre.
What up?
And we are coming back to the Marvel villains and see what caused the conception of the Marvel villain problem among moviegoers. And did it actually exist? And did Marvel fix it if it did exist?
Right.
We kind of went over Phase 1 last week, and we found out that we didn't really think there was a villain problem in Phase 1. All the villains were pretty solid, all things considered. Like, none of them were really amazing besides Loki, I guess. But they were still good villains, I would say, overall, for the most part.
Exactly.
So, we're going to move on to Phase 2. And I would honestly say, I think Phase 2 is responsible for the conception that Marvel had a villain problem. And I think the next two films especially kind of caused all this. And we're going to start with Iron Man 3 with Aldrich Killian / I guess the Mandarin?
What do you mean he guess? He says it. He says...
But no, now we're getting... Now, I am the Mandarin! I made so many jokes about this because I was so mad afterwards. I only started liking this movie a couple of years ago because I was so mad. And by the way, it wasn't because I had some deep attachment to the Mandarin. I didn't know who he was till I heard he was the villain in this movie. It's because the marketing had built him up, the Ben Kingsley version, up so much, and I was getting so much into it. I honestly couldn't enjoy the rest of the movie.
That's how I was feeling.
I was just kind of just sitting there with this
scowl.
What the heck did they just do to me?
Yeah,
I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah.
But yeah, this twist really made me hate this movie, and I kind of came to realize it's not really because Ben Kingsley's version of the Mandarin wasn't real. It's because the villain we got sucks.
Yeah.
I don't think Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian is interesting at all.
It's not. I don't like him.
He's just a worse syndrome.
Worse.
I know how it should have ended. Already made that observation, but yeah, he's just some guy Tony wronged in the past. And it's not like he had a deep relationship with him like he did with the other villains he's had.
Yeah.
So he's just some guy that Tony pissed off once. And now he has fire powers, and I guess his plan is kind of interesting, the whole my new medical procedure is unstable, so we're just gonna blame it all on terrorism.
Terrible.
Honestly, Ben Kingsley in the first half of that movie was a much better villain.
Yeah.
He was very intimidating and kind of methodical, and I liked it was a good update of the Mandarin from kind of the Fu Manchu kind of villain we got in the comics that would have been called racist if they did it now.
Right.
Which I'm wondering how.
But also makes sense because at the time in the 60s, Vietnam War was going on.
Yeah. And
now we're dealing with different.
So
things,
they made him more of Islamic extremist kind of terrorist villain.
Yeah.
And I think that worked. I think Ben Kingsley had a presence to him and everything. I'm gonna give it to Ben Kingsley. He's actually pretty funny as Trevor Slatter. I can see why they gave him his own little one shot.
Yeah.
I think that was more just to get Marvel fans to shut up. He's look, there's a real Mandarin, so shut up about it. Even though now we're gonna get the real Mandarin in the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Hee-Haw.
A movie that nobody cares about. Anyway,
well, no, I care about because the real Mandarin's in it.
But anyway, this is what I was saying earlier. They could have used, instead of this Aldrich Killian nonsense, they could have used Justin Hammer instead, because he was already interesting. So just take Justin Hammer, who he was, like I said, perfect mirror of Tony Stark, but in a darker way, and just use him instead. And you could even, if you really want, you could still do the Mandarin twist, but have Aldrich Killian not exist. Okay. Instead have it be Justin
Hammer.
They
also waste AIM. AIM's just in this film. I forget that's a thing most of the time.
Yeah. So
we're not going to get MODOK, the giant-headed robot guy?
I guess not.
Oh, that's the one thing I was living for.
Played by Danny DeVito. That'd be perfect.
I would literally kill myself out of happiness. So either way, I'm going to kill myself. So Marvel, my blood is on your hands.
Wow.
But yeah, I think this is probably the worst villain we had up till now.
Terrible.
Marvel could have topped themselves in a worse villain. Oh no, we have Malekith next. Literally the blandest, most generic piece of crap villain you could think of. There is literally nothing to this character.
That's awful.
He's just a blank piece of wood. No, a blank piece of wood would have been more interesting. It would have had some texture on it.
Man.
This character is literally just a gray blob of nothing.
I don't remember a single line that he said in this movie at all. I don't.
Where's the ether?
There you go. That's the one line he had. I have to believe you because I really don't remember.
I'm sure he said that at one point. Literally, man, and he has such a he has a cooler look in the comics and a more like kind of fun personality in the comics.
No, just make him gray.
Yeah, that's what they did, and I give him no dialogue. And when you do, make it a different language. Honestly, I think Curse is a better villain because at least he's intimidating.
Ain't nothing good.
They sucked the color out of him too.
They're racist, clearly. Anyway.
No, Curse is black, so they were.
Oh, okay, we good then. But look. Nothing good about that villain. Barely anything good about that movie as a whole. Can I just be real? And a lot of times I'm more gracious when it comes to movies. Like, I like Incredible Hulk. I like Iron Man 2. Like, I can watch those and still enjoy myself.
There's enough stuff that stands out about them that are good.
Yeah, at least in ideas and concept. Thor's the Dark
good.
World.
I like Loki.
Loki's good.
And I like kind of his progression.
But what progression, really? Because in the end, we find out he's still a villain.
Well, but then in Thor Ragnarok, they kind of resolved that very quickly.
Yeah, but
apparently he was.
They resolved it so quickly. That means
pretty much just because they didn't want to deal with it.
They didn't even need to do anything in Dark World.
It's because they didn't want to deal with it, and they kind of just have to remind you that Thor: The Dark World exists in Endgame because they made the mistake of making this movie crucial to like the Infinity Stone storyline. Oh yeah. They have the Reality Stone. What you can do with a stone that warps reality. He makes a tornado and shoots like bursts of it at Thor.
Yeah.
That's it. Real creative, guys. Real creative. Would they just say, okay, we made $1.5 billion on the Avengers. We don't need to try anymore. We can just make a generic piece of crap and people pay to see it. Made money, so I guess they were right.
Yeah, they duped us.
Thank God for the Russo brothers. Except when it comes to the Hulk, they ruined him.
Yep.
Is there anything else we can say about this?
It's garbage.
Like, maybe they made him... Because I've heard some people say, like, it's because personality in the comics was kind of similar to what they did with Loki. So they didn't want to do the same thing. I'd rather just have a repeat villain than
a bad one.
Boring villain that I barely remember.
Or here's an idea. Be creative and change something about the character for the better. Not strip it all of its life and soul.
Like, this is probably one of the worst comic book villains I've ever seen.
Man.
Like, because even, like, the really bad ones, I at least remember them. Like, I remember Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze or Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face. But, like, I don't remember practically anything about this character. Like, I only remember his name because of, like, he had that episode of Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Where he was interesting and cool and stuff.
Yeah, and he had a fun personality and a cool look instead of just a white elf. And then I got half my face turned black. I'm a black elf.
Diversity.
Except they had the other black elf become a giant black elf.
Yeah.
A big horn mask.
Yep.
And then Kevin Feige said, fantastic.
Brilliant.
This is the best villain ever.
We gotta move on from this. I can't think about this anymore.
But these villains are the reason that I think the villain problem thing came to be in the first place. Like, this is like the reason I think after this, like, is when everyone was talking about how bad Marvel villains were.
Yeah.
I blame Malekith and also Ardrich Killian and kind of part of that. And because all the other villains in Phase 1 were just kind of, they sufficed for the most part. Like, you didn't really have anything other than Loki to, like, refute that.
Yeah.
Actually, though, the next movie, Captain America Winter Soldier, I think has some great villains.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the main villain of the movie, would that be Alexander Pierce? Is he the main villain?
Yeah, he's the main villain, I'd say.
Like, because kind of Hydra as a whole is the villain.
He's just kind of the...
But because he's the one running the show.
Yeah.
I think what makes him work is because unlike the Red Skull, who's just your typical evil Nazi, everything exudes evil from him. Robert Redford doesn't really play it like he's being evil. He plays it like he thinks he's doing the right thing, and he plays it all very calm and confident.
Just a guy
and
who's doing
likable.
his job.
Yeah. Like, even when, like, his plane is, like, falling apart on him, he stays calm and, like, kind of smirking through the whole thing. And I think that makes him, like, kind of, like, probably more threatening than the Red Skull, to be honest. Because the Red Skull is just so overtly evil that, like, I'm like, oh, what a big shock. This guy, unlike, say, Obadiah Stane, who's also just, you see him on stage, like, oh, he's the villain.
Right.
Like, you kind of believe that people would trust this guy, and he could have hidden this whole time. And, like, when he's just, like, dying, he says, Hail Hydra. That's pretty chilling, actually.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier, even though he's the title character, although not really in the movie that much, I think is also very compelling.
And, like I said, he's the perfect example of types of villains I love when they connect to the past.
But because the audience doesn't know that from us, he's just kind of the scary...
Who doesn't know that?
People who don't read comics.
They showed it on the posters.
But they had, like, stuff covering his eye, around his eye. I could see people not buying it. But I guess, yeah, if you Googled who the Winter Soldier was, it would tell you. But would many people remember who Bucky was from the first movie? Like, who aren't, like...
I know it's hard to say because we obviously knew.
Yeah, we knew. I knew because we're Mightiest Heroes.
Uh-huh.
But I think he works as kind of a Terminator-esque, like, just imposing, like, unstoppable, like, kind of force of nature, like, that they have to fight throughout. Some of the best action scenes in the MCU.
Yeah, really well choreographed.
Like, he really, like, sells that he's this force to be reckoned with. And, like, not seeing any of his face through most of it just kind of adds to that.
Yeah.
But then when we find out that it's Bucky, and he begins to have all this conflict about, like, fighting Captain America because he has all these, like, repressed memories that are coming back to him. And we kind of see how Hydra's been torturing him this whole time. And just the conflict inside, that just really helps you emotionally connect to this character.
Exactly.
And it makes him a lot more compelling. Because he kind of just does work as kind of just, the muscle throughout most of the film. But like,
very cool, though. It
is kind of weird that the movie's called Winter Soldier, and he's probably a pretty secondary plot line to the movie.
He's still kind of the crux of it.
Well, he's basically, through most of the movie, he's just the muscle that Hydra has.
It's kind of like Darth Vader in Star Wars, the first one.
Okay, and like Tarkin is like Pierce in this scenario.
Exactly.
But he works as that very well. I think it's just kind of funny because his name's in the title, and he's really not the main focus of the story. But Hydra in general is great as kind of this hidden villain.
Right.
They were there the whole time, and they've been manipulating everything. You could easily mess that up and make it seem very contrived and dumb, but they do it very well.
Yeah.
And we want to get back to Artem Zola, which we talked about him briefly. I think he's pretty intimidating in his one scene.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like his character's a bit inconsistent, because he seems very, like, in the first movie that he's just kind of doing it because he's kind of scared of dying, and he's kind of playing along with it. But now he's just full-on Hydra extremist, like, he's the one that's been, like, running, like, things up till now.
Makes it even more scary, though, because he could have been suppressing all that before.
Okay.
Just to hide it.
Also, I think it was a mistake to kill him off. I think you could have done more with him. Apparently there was, like, scripted that he would, showing that he downloaded himself into, like, his robot body, but they cut that out. So, seeing how he has not shown up since, I'm just, like, kind of the Red Skull. I assumed he was dead. So maybe they'll just bring him back in, like, 10 years. Like, the only other villain I can think of is Brock Rumlow, who became Crossbones.
Oh, yeah.
He works as a solid secondary muscle villain.
Yeah.
He has, like, some grit to him and some personality. But I think it's a good setup for him being a villain. But as we'll get to, they don't do much with him later. We'll get to him, like, when we get to Civil War.
Yeah.
But I'd say, all around, I'd say all the villains in this movie are done either at least pretty well to very well. Like, I very much like Hydra and Alexander Pierce and Winter Soldier. I think they all work as really good villains. And I think this was, like, the first... Honestly, I'd say this is the first one, other than Loki, that kind of, like, blew me away.
Oh, yeah. This, when it came out, this was probably, I said, the best Marvel Studios movie.
I'd still say this is top 3.
Oh, yeah. So
Marvel said, well, we gave him a bunch of good villains. Let's give him a boring, lame, forgettable villain again. We got Ronan, played by Lee Pace in Guardians of the Galaxy.
I forgot.
For a movie that does so many things right, like, the villains just... he's not as bad as Malekith, because I remember he has at least some memorable moments, like mostly with just the Guardians messing with him.
Yeah.
I actually think there was an interesting motivation that they briefly addressed, but they don't explore it, that they could have done, where kind of he feels that all his father and his father's father, like all these Kree have died in this war, and it just goes away because of some treaty. And as like kind of this judge for the Kree, he feels this isn't right and that they need to be punished for their crimes, and that's why he's kind of enacted that. That's actually a pretty good motivation. But
Yeah.
it's just that he just says that pretty much as I've just said it. Like, they don't explore any of the emotion behind it. He's pretty much just your regular stone cold, like always serious villain. His look is pretty boring. They took out all the color from the character.
There they go, ripping out all the color.
Yeah.
Racist. No, but in all seriousness, to give them a little slack, this movie, it's trying to juggle like 5
That's
different
true. That's
protagonists,
true.
so I can give them a little slack for being a little.
They could have kept his costume green. Even Captain Marvel was smarter than that.
Yeah.
And every...
Ah.
Yes. Every time I say it, you cringe.
I do.
Captain
Stop.
Marvel. But yeah, the villain, he works as like the plot device that he is.
Yeah,
But
I think that's all he's supposed to
I
be.
think they could have. I think James Gunn's even said he wished he could have done more with them. What do you think of Nebula?
She's kind of like another Terminator type thing there.
But
for real.
she doesn't even, unlike Winter Soldier, she doesn't really do anything cool action-wise in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, she's just there so you can tell, like, okay, we'll probably use her later.
They establish an interesting dynamic that we actually get explored in other films, but in like this one, she's pretty much just there. And I think they've done great things with that character in other films, but there's really not much to her in this one. Like, it's pretty much just like Ronan, just base motivations, just said straightforward, and that's it.
Yeah.
She looks cooler than Ronan, I'll give her that.
Yeah, she has color.
And I'll give Karen Gillian, like, she actually shaved her head for this. Give her credit for that.
Yeah.
So now we will move on to kind of one that most people have a mixed opinion on, which is Ultron, played by James Spader in Avengers Age of Ultron.
Yeah. So, for me, as you know, I have very mixed feelings on this film, like, as a whole. Like, I like it. Certain things I like about it, certain ideas I like about it more, but just, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just not going to pop this thing and be like, oh, I want to watch Age of Ultron. Like, I probably won't. But when it comes to Ultron himself, this doesn't really feel like Ultron, just the way that he carries himself, and I get it. He's supposed to be like Tony Stark, I guess. He has that programming and whatever. But I don't know. For me, it just doesn't feel like Ultron. He still serves the purpose he's supposed to for the film, and he's definitely interesting, and when he's on screen, he's entertaining, but he doesn't have the same, like, killer, like, no personality. And I get it's a movie. Like, you have to have personality, but sometimes when you have that one character who just does not care about what your human emotions are like, to me that's interesting, and I kind of miss that. And I feel like it would have been interesting, this came in my head, especially when the Avengers are all about camaraderie and teamwork, and this movie was talking about them maybe building some antipathy with each other. Having a villain that doesn't care at all about friendship and loyalty and emotions would have been so interesting, but they didn't go that route.
I'm kind of also a bit mixed on this film. I think I like more about it than I dislike. So this is definitely the worst Avengers film, but I still enjoy it, and I had really fun watching this the first time I saw it, and I'm still willing to, like, slip it in every now and then, give it a watch. Ultron, I'm gonna say we've gotten that stone cold robot character in movies so many times that I feel like they had to do something different to keep it fresh. And I feel like his emotions, if anything, make him a bit more scarier because he's a bit more unhinged, and he will lose his temper and get angry and strike back. The juxtaposition between that and him trying to be this more charming, like Tony Stark-like character does make him, like, compelling to me. And I do think he can be intimidating in this film. Like, there's a good number of scenes where I think he can be scary, and I think they still did a good job capturing his motivation on how humanity needs to be kind of wiped out because they're just going to destroy each other anyway. So in order to save the world, humanity has to go. And I think they captured that instead of just being based, ooh, this is basic logic, must do this. Like they kind of captured how that in a very human way, which helps you connect to him a lot more than you would have. Because if it's just a robot AI, you're just kind of like, oh, it's just programming and stuff. But when he has more of a personality, you kind of get more sucked into that kind of motivation.
Maybe it's more just the charm. Yeah, I just felt
maybe I think maybe a couple jokes go away, but I think if you took away it altogether, he wouldn't be as entertaining.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think maybe they were just trying to capture what they had with Loki again?
That's an interesting idea right there.
But I think Ultron works for me for the most part. Like most of the things in this movie, he's not perfect. I have some problems. Like you said, I think the humor can be a bit too much. I'd say that about the whole movie. The jokes kind of are a bit too much, and they don't feel as like well weaved in as the first one. Like the script was a lot tighter on that first one. I find Ultron compelling. I love his like kind of final scene with Vision.
Yeah, that's good.
Like kind of them reflecting on humanity and like what he missed about that. I think that works very well. I think the robot army is kind of just that's a problem that most Marvel like Avengers films have. It's just faceless army. I'd say it's not as bad as the Chitauri, who just nothing is explained about them. We didn't talk about the Chitauri, but they're basically just a faceless alien army that is just there for the Avengers to fight.
Just a plot device. I think it's just the charm and stuff. I get what you're saying. The emotions kind of make it more unhinged and makes them a little more unpredictable, which I like. I do like that, actually. It's not what I would expect in Ultron, but it does make it interesting. I think it's just some of that charm that Tony Stark-ish, like, I don't know. Just to me, it just doesn't. It doesn't work.
One thing I just remembered that I find interesting is when he kidnaps Black Widow, you could think, oh, he just kidnapped her so that they can find him at Sokovia as like a plot device. But they give a reason. It's because the Maximoffs leave him. He needs somebody to talk to because he needs that like human connection. I find like just moments like that I find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on to Ant-Man, where we get Darren Cross / Yellow Jacket, played by Corey Stoll.
Nothing that I care about with this villain at all.
I actually like this villain. He's not great, but I like him more than most people. I honestly kind of feel bad for him because he's someone that just Hank Pym kind of threw to the curve, who had all this great ambition, but he kind of just left because he was too much like him. And you can kind of see how that would drive him to try to outdo Hank Pym and like be better than him and take everything. And how that mixed with the Pym particles that he's been experimenting with has just like made him go like off the wall bonkers.
Yeah, but to me, it's just more boring business guy villain.
I just think there's a bit more to him than just a generic businessman villain. And have we really gotten that many boring businessman villains here? Because the only one I'm thinking of is Ardris Killian.
I am the Mandarin.
Because, yeah.
Oh.
I like the Yellow Jacket costume. I think it's pretty
cool.
Good looking.
Yeah.
They definitely changed this from the comics where Hank Pym's Yellow Jacket.
You know, that would be cool, though, if,
When are they going to acknowledge that Hank Pym is the problem in these movies? Because I think he's responsible for both villains.
He'd be cool as a villain, though.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if they kind of just skip over those skim over that, because he creates the villains in both the Ant-Man movies.
I mean, Tony Stark creates all.
Well, yeah, but everyone always brings up that. No one brings up the Hank Pym's, and probably not that great of a guy.
Mm.
But yeah, I'd say Phase 2 is definitely the most mixed when it comes to villains, because we've had some great villains, some mixed quality villains, and some of the worst villains.
The worst villains.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I think is the reason we have that whole villain problem thing that came about. And I think Marvel would improve immensely with Phase 3, where I think they kind of took some of the criticisms that people were giving to heart and like tried to improve. So I'm wondering, is Marvel actually like listening to these criticisms and trying to improve them? I'm excited to when we get to Phase 3 next week, because Phase 3 has some of the best villains that Marvel has.
Yeah.
And I think it's like their best phase when it comes to their villains.
Yeah.
So we will see you then. So goodbye, everybody, and have a fantastic day.
Adios.